Welcome back to the farm for another project. This your first time, I hope you enjoy. Kind of hanging out with the goats here this morning. Before we get started on today's project, so we just got an order for somebody that their grandson is a long-range competition shooter and they want to have a shadow box to put all of his trophies in. And I thought, well, why build just a traditional shadow box? Why don't we build it so it actually looks like a scope? So I've got something glued up inside. Let's go ahead and head inside the shop and let's get started. So here's the glued up slab we're going to be using. So this is 1 inch thick alder that I picked up from a local mill, which is really nice because then I get to support a local business, and I really enjoy working with this alder because it doesn't have a lot of wood movement when I'm actually carving into it. So first thing we want to do is we want to level it because we're going to be gluing this together, so we have to make sure we got really good joints. So we're going to do a 0.05 leveling pass on this side. We'll flip it over. We'll do a 0.05 leveling on the other side. Since we do have a glue up, and because this is coming from a mill, you can see some of the rough spots here. I want to make sure this is perfectly level for my glue up. So let's get it leveled first, and then we'll come back. We're going to go ahead and start cutting the circles out because the client really didn't understand what I was talking about adding a reticle to the scope. So what I did is I actually cut it out on the laser. So this is going to be the piece that we're going to put through the plexiglass on the front. So it actually looks like you're looking through a scope to look at all the trophies back behind it. So I'm hoping it all comes together. Let's get this thing level and let's get it cut out. Okay, so now we're nice and level. Now we've gone this down to right about 0.95 of an inch, just underneath an inch. So we're going to go ahead and cut the two 18-inch rounds. But what we're going to do on the round on this side is where this is going to go, I'm actually going to give myself a 1/4 of an inch lip, so I have somewhere to install this and the plexiglass that's going to go back behind it. And then on this side, I'm actually going to carve down about a 1/2 of an inch, so we just have a little bit deeper pocket to put all the coins in. So hopefully between the two of those and everything's going to fit. You can see I got a couple of knots on here. I tried to kind of put this right in the middle where I'm going to miss them, so we'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully we don't have to glue up another board. Okay, so this customer reached out to me just in time too, and she actually wants to add an engraving around one of the rings. So I'm going to go ahead and set my Z, and we're going to use a 60-degree V-bit. Now, one thing I always like to do whenever I'm doing engraving, especially on something like this, even though I've leveled it, there might be just a little bit of unevenness from this side to this side, so I like to get as close to my V-carve as possible to reset my 0. So now we're going to go ahead and probe for our Z. Make sure our bit is exactly where we want it, which is right here is going to be essentially the arch, the top of the arch that we're going to start the engraving with. So now we'll start the engraving and then we'll get everything cut out. So all the carving just got done. So we've got load, aim, fire, and perfect shot every time going around it. So now let's go ahead and pull this board out and let's see if we can do a test fit of our reticle. Let me go grab it. Okay, so here's the reticle, which, like I said, I gave myself just about a 1/4 of an inch to work with. I think that's going to fit just perfect. So it goes right around the text. Everything looks good. All right, let's go ahead and finish cutting these out now that we know it's going to fit. let's get the machine out of the way here. Let's see how these pop out. Oh, that's perfect. That text just came out nice and crisp. I love those. Those V-bits are just awesome. And then there's going to be our backing. So now we're going to do some real quick sanding, and then we're going to come through and I'm going to make some shelves. They're going to go across here so we can lay all of his coins in it. So next thing we got to do is we got to get the piece of plexiglass cut out. So let's go grab the plexiglass and get that down while we're working on the shelves. Okay, so I got everything kind of test fit here, kind of laid out. Everything looks like it's going to go together really, really nice. So what we're going to work on next is building the shelves. So I went and grabbed the piece of alder that had some really nice character that kind of goes along with what we have here. I think that's going to work out really well for the shelves. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this over to the table saw, and essentially I'm going to cut a 1/8 inch notch and come down 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to come back out here like this, and I'm going to rip this whole shelf. Will probably be about 1.5 inches tall. So I'm going to rip this piece out, and then I'm going to rip that out to kind of give us a nice little shelf so he can actually stack the coins in there. So let me go cut this out, and I'll go get these installed, and then we're going to work on figuring out how we're going to install the crosshairs. Okay, so we're getting ready to do the letters. Now, whenever I'm doing really fine engravings like this, I personally prefer to paint by hand. Now, some guys are going to lay down that blue tape stuff. I can't remember what they call it. They put it over the top of this, and then they carve it, and then they come back and spray paint and stuff like that. I'm not a fan of spray paint. I don't like the way it looks. I like to actually get in there so I can make sure I'm getting all the details. And as far as taking care of the bleed out, what I do is anytime I'm getting ready, I actually put a couple of coats of shellac on top of it. And then I just come back and I'll actually go through and hand paint the letters. I just keep plenty of rags, so anything that does kind of creep out of these, I immediately hit it and just kind of wipe it down right away. So then hopefully that kind of gives a little bit more detail, and I just personally like doing it like that. I don't like spray paint. So let's get through here and let's see if we can get these all done. So now you can see we have everything all painted, so we'll let this sit for about an hour. And then we're going to come through and we'll just hit it with some 220 grit just to kind of clean everything up. And then we'll do one more coat of the shellac, and then we'll call it good here on the top. Okay, so just so you can see what I mean here. So we have all the letters, but if I put how I was going to attach it before, it fits above the letters, but it just kind of seems like it's just too busy and it's just cutting it too close. So if you look right there on the engraving, it's just really, really too close to it for what I like. So I cut another one that is just about 0.05 of an inch smaller, so it actually fits down in there. So now you can see the difference of it's actually going to show all the text, and this will lay down on the inside. But what we have to do now is we have to have something to attach this and the plexiglass to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go cut another really small piece of this alder, and I'm going to cut it the same diameter as the side of this here so that it actually will still stay buried behind it. But then I'll actually have a ring that I can install all the way around the inside, that I can actually have something to install this and the piece of plexiglass too, so it all kind of drops down inside of here instead of sitting over the top of it. So it's going to take a little bit to kind of make sure that it fits really perfect, because I want it to fit snug but not so tight that it causes everything to move, because you know acrylic, any bit of torque to it, it is going to move and not sit flat. So it's going to take a couple chances, but let's go get it on the machine and hopefully we can get it cut the first time. Okay, so I have a leftover piece of 1/2 inch MDF. So this is what I'm going to cut that very inner ring out of to attach everything to. And because I wanted to really dial this in nice and tight, because with the acrylic, you don't really get a chance to sand it or come back at it's one and done. So I'm going to use this to cut that inner circle where you can just see the scope line. So I'm actually going to make it a little bit thinner than what we have cut out with the laser, and then make sure it fits in nice and snug but doesn't twist or anything on the inside of that circle. So then once I know that this is the right measurement, I can lay that piece of acrylic right on top of this so we can cut that out, use the same measurement. So let's cut this ring out first, and then we'll get the acrylic done. Okay, so we just cut out that really thin piece of MDF. So what I want to do now is test fit to see how snug this is. And I know it seems like it fits in there perfect. What I really want to do is I don't want my acrylic to be quite so tight. So I think I'm going to take a couple thousandths off with the acrylic. But what I want to do is push this all the way to the base, just to do a quick test fit. So now that I know I have a ridge for the scope to mount on, oh, that's perfect. And that lines up in there perfect and leaves me the little tiny 1/4 inch gap, so that way the acrylic will actually sit level with this. So now I know we're good. I'm going to go change the vectors really quick just to give it a slight, like I said, just a couple thousandths less, so the acrylic just drops right in. It doesn't have to be super tight, because we're going to end up putting screws around the whole outside of it anyway. So I'm going to actually go throw some glue on this really quick so this can harden while we're cutting out the acrylic, and then we can get everything glued and set this aside so we can get the shelves installed. So hopefully we can finish this thing up. Okay, so I laid the piece of acrylic right on top of the MDF. The nice thing with this is all I had to do was just move the clamps really quick, drop the piece of acrylic on it, reset my Z height, and then change over to my acrylic bit. So now once this is done, in theory, since this is a couple thousand smaller, once it gets all the way around, this piece of acrylic should actually drop right down in here, which will be perfect, because then I know it's going to fit nice and snug just how I want it in there. But this is one thing I do like about when you do a test cut on something like this, just leave it on the board, because now you have kind of a guide. You already have everything set, so instead of having to set your X, your Y, and your everything again, throw your Z in, change out your bits, and get it done. So let's get this thing cut out and finish this thing up. Man, that bit sure cuts this stuff like glass. So this is 1/4 inch thick acrylic. So that tool path actually took 31 seconds from starting there, coming down, one pass, cut through, and just a perfect cut. I mean, it's just perfect and clean all the way around. Nice thing is all these little pieces here that are up, once I peel this plastic off, all those will come off with it. So let's go get this thing glued down. Okay, so now that comes the fun part. We've got this, it's going to get lined up here. So now when I built the software, I tried to put the I in the aim and the E for every right at the very bottom and right at the very top of the circle. So when I'm trying to line this up, because if you've ever tried to line up something square inside something circle, it's really not that easy to line things up. So if I go right down from the I and right down from the E, there is my center line. So I should have equal amounts of the side of the crosshair, top and bottom, and that looks pretty darn close. So I think what I'm going to do, because I want to make sure that this stays in the exact position that I want, is I'm going to drill 4 holes. So I'm going to use 2 guide points here and 2 guide points out here, because those are the same spots I'm going to put the acrylic. So that way, as I pre-drill that hole, I can make sure this lines up exactly back where I want it to go. And I'll probably put a couple of drops of super glue in some of the odd corners, just to kind of keep it in place and not have to worry about any squeeze out. So let's get this pre-drilled and marked, and then we're going to go ahead and drop the plexiglass in to do one test fit, and then we'll pop the plexiglass out so we can put whatever finish we're going to put on here, so I don't have to worry about it getting on the acrylic. We'll let that dry, and then we're going to work on getting these shelves installed here on the backing while we're letting that dry, so we can try to finish this thing up. Okay, so I haven't installed the shelves yet. Now I'm just trying to kind of lay these out and kind of figure out how I want them. So what I want to do is I want the top and the bottom to be the same distance as far as the coins for that size, but I want to keep a little bit of a different distance between these two. That's why these shelves are not all equal, because not each coin or challenge coin is going to be the same size. So some of them may be a little bit larger, some may be smaller, so that's why I want to make different size shelves for each one. But I want to leave this gap around the outside, because as we test fit here with this, I want to make sure that everything clears and is essentially centered from the inside of here, because the crosshairs are going to be our left and right level. So I want to make sure each one of these shelves is perfectly level with that. So then I'll kind of figure out about where I want them to be inside. We'll double check them, get them as close as we can. Then we'll reinstall this back on the top and do our final little movements to make sure everything's at least square with all the crosshairs. And then we're just going to put one finished nail in the corner of each one with a little bit of glue underneath it to hold that together. I think that's going to be more than enough to hold the coins. And then once we get those set in, we'll go ahead and get the finish on the base of this. And then while that's drying, we're going to go ahead and install the acrylic on the top. And then we'll get the hinge installed on the one side. I came up with something kind of fun, I think, for as far as opening this. I'm not actually going to put a latch on it. I found some kind of cool round hinges to put on one side, but I'm actually going to use rare earth magnets, and I'm going to put a magnet on 3 of these sides, so out here on the edge and one on the top of each one. But to open this, I just happen to have a nice clean 308 piece of brass, which, if anybody knows, 308 is a very common long-range rifle. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to about 1 inch, and then I'm actually going to use one of my drill bits, and I'm going to drill a hole right here in the side. So what you're actually going to open this with is going to be the base of a 308 shell. So I think that'll be kind of a cool little touch for it. So the magnets will hold it shut. That'll be how you open it. So let's get these shelves installed, get some finish on it, and man, I'm excited about finishing this thing up. Okay, so we got one finish nail and glue set on each one of these. We'll do one last test fit here right before we get the finish on it. And now you see what I can do now is use this as my square when I install the hinge to make sure everything is going to be nice and level. And then what I'll do is I'll actually just take a couple of wood clamps, put some wood clamps on the outside, and then I'll install the hinge, and then I'll come back through and we're going to pre-drill all of our holes to get all the magnets in it. So let's get some finish on it, and then we're going to drop the epoxy in while we're waiting for that finish to dry. Okay, so now we have all the holes pre-drilled. Let's go ahead and drop these in. And I like to do my screws through the acrylic by hand, not with a drill, just to make sure that I don't split anything. The last thing you want when you're at this point is to crack your acrylic. That'd just be a bad day. Alright, so I got the finishing touches put on this morning. I went ahead and added the hinge on the one side. Then we got the bullet over here, so we can actually use this 308 casing to actually work as a handle. So you can actually open this up. So you can see now we've got shelves that have a little over 2-inch gap all the way through, so it should give him plenty of space to hang those. I've got rare earth magnets on top and bottom, on the front and bottom of the door, to also just kind of help this thing stay shut, since it is going to be hanging up on the wall. Wanted to make sure it always goes back to the same spot. Getting everything to line up perfectly square with the crosshairs and the wood and all the grains and everything was a little challenge on the hinge, but we got it done, and it came together really, really nice. I really hope they like it. Well, thanks for joining me for another video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share. If you have any questions or comments about feeds and speeds, the bits that I was using, any other questions about this, please put those down below. I'll do what I can to answer all of your questions. I really appreciate that. And if you really enjoyed this video, you want to join me for all my other projects, all my other adventures, consider hitting the subscribe button. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around.